I'd like to welcome a very special guest, Bastian Grimm, the CEO of the German agency PCase, a performance marketing agency. Bastian is also the 2019 European Search Personality of the Year. Bastian was also supposed to be our guest at Salesdras. He didn't make it for reasons related to I guess storms and planes in February, but we hope next time it's going to work out. But instead, for now, we have a little bit of his time to talk to him about the situation in Germany, in marketing in Germany, and also about the situation in his agency. Thank you very much, Bastian, for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it. And again, I'm very, very sorry that the talk in February didn't work out. Yeah, it was a bit of an unfortunate situation with air travel being grounded. So I was supposed to fly in the morning and just nothing happened there. So yeah, I tried to make it, but it was just not possible. So I guess if there's the next edition, then I will be there.
Yeah,
for sure.
There will be a next edition and you will be invited. So I hope you will be there.
Great.
Bastian, I'd like to start by asking you a little bit about the broader situation in Germany. First of all, where are you based?
We're based in Berlin, so pretty much central Berlin is where we have our headquarters. So like 130-ish people there, and then like a smaller office in the Ukraine, which is a development office. But yeah, we're basically running out of Germany.
Mm-hmm. And how is the situation in Berlin right now in terms of limitations and in terms of how people are working and what's functioning and what's not?
Yeah, I mean, so for us, I mean, we are in this somewhat lockdown situation, I would say. For like we're in home office. We started mid of March, so like I think we're kind of now in week 4, and like the government regulations kicked in like 2.5 weeks ago, I would say. So we were a bit earlier moving the entire company into home office, and then kind of literally the week after is when the official regulations started to come up. And right now it's that. I mean, I guess it's pretty much the same all over Europe in that sense. So like we're working from home, like the like grocery stores and whatnot are still open, but like non-essential stuff is shut down, like restaurants and whatnot. And yeah, in Germany, I feel it took a while for people to take it serious, even though I mean that's probably also somewhat the same for most countries. But yeah, it's a shame, right? I mean, for those that take it serious and they stay home, and then you have some that just don't understand it, or it just takes a bit longer, or need stronger regulations, I guess, either way. But yeah, I think for now, I guess people kind of settled in. For us, it was also a bit of an interesting one because, I mean, we are used to work from home. Like,
Mhm.
people are working from home a day a week, sometimes 2 days a week, but like moving a full company, I mean, probably the same for you guys, right? Moving a full company into a home office situation is a bit of a different beast. But yeah, overall, I mean, in Germany right now, it feels that people somewhat are, I would say, like okay with the situation and make the best out of it. I suppose, however, you can't do that forever, right? I mean, like the impact on the economy, but also like the businesses in general. I think is what at some point at least needs to be considered, and then like we kind of probably need to figure out how we get out of this situation
Mhm.
at some point. But for now, I feel that this, like if you want to call it social distancing, or just the restrictions in general, they totally make sense to
Mhm.
kind of get it under control, if that's even possible.
Mhm. Do you have any notion of the consumer mood? I mean, how are people in terms of the sort of the economic downturn that's related to what's going on? Are consumers relatively upbeat, or are people worried? Do you have a sense of that?
I mean, Germany per se is relatively Amazon heavy, right? So there was always a strong preference, I would say, for Amazon per se. The other interesting thing about the German market in general is that like it's still pretty heavy on cash, which is
Mhm.
for me as a marketer is always a bit strange. But yeah, there's still a lot of people that pay with just good old hard cash, and like a lot of the stores now, especially the groceries and like food stores and whatnot, they move to this like saying, okay, we prefer card payments if possible. So I think I'm gonna be really curious. I think it's too early to say, but I'm gonna be really curious how that impacts also like the general consumer behavior in the long run. So
Mhm.
if we potentially finally seeing some more adoption of card payments in Germany, because if we have like a lot of these situations where companies before would have said like, well, you need a minimum volume of like 10 euros for even be able to do that, and just like in the US, everyone would laugh about that, right? So I think this is interesting to see. I'm probably too early to say. In general, right now, I mean, I think that's somewhat the same. Of course, there's we saw I mentioned Amazon, so we saw already that they had to somewhat reduce shipping of non-essential things. Like I was buying some cables just I think yesterday, the day before, for my home office. So like they already said, well, this can take like 1 or 2 weeks until you get it. Usually with Prime, you would have had it next day, right? So I think those things are the kind of the result of even stronger online shopping. But on the other hand, like for the likes of let's say Amazon Fresh, or even like we have like other big like food stores that normally would have a delivery service, you can't even book dates anymore. Like they're literally booked until end of April. So it's both, right?
Let's talk a little bit about PKs. What
That's
kind
always
of
good.
what kind of an agency is PKs?
Well, I mean, PK's originally, like, we were founded already in 2007. So we started out as a paid search only play, but relatively quickly became like what we call a full service performance marketing agency. So we still do paid search, right? Not only in Google but also pretty internationally. We do SEO as well as content, and we have a strong kind of backing around marketing technologies. I guess that's what it is in a wider sense. And the interesting thing probably is, in comparison to a lot of other local agencies, we work very internationally. So we have
Mhm.
roughly 20 different languages, native speaker level in the office in Berlin,
Mhm.
which also probably kind of leads into a thing in how we perceived, I'd say, this entire outbreak situation, because it
Mhm.
might have been a bit different for us than might have been for other agencies. So
Mhm.
for one of our largest accounts that we work with for quite a while already is Airbnb. I guess that's no real secret. I mean, we kind of openly can talk about it, which is quite cool. But like if you look at the situation, how that evolved, it was like we obviously first of all noticed or got the note, let's put it that way, that travel to Italy wasn't possible anymore. And then obviously what happened, of course, with Airbnb is like, well, why would you advertise that, right? So that's the first campaign pausing came in, and then it evolved over to like it was France next, and then it was Austria, where they had the strong outbreak. And then at some point, when the U.S. president kind of said, oh, well, global travel ban, obviously that impacts an account such as Airbnb quite significantly
Mhm.
at the end of the day. Because, well, if you can't travel, then for them advertisement doesn't make that much sense. I mean, they're still doing and we still doing work, but like you don't have destination advertising anymore. And the same was true for like hotel clients that were in the same situation, right? So we have one client that's in Italy, is present in Italy with like multiple houses, and they were forced by government to shut them down. So obviously, I mean, you won't promote that if you can't either travel there or if the houses are closed. So I guess, yeah, for us it was a bit like this kind of, it evolved through how it happened kind of in Europe, I guess.
Mhm. Mhm. What about your non-travel clients? I mean, you serve clients sort of across sectors, right?
Yeah.
How have other clients responded?
Well, I think it's both, right? So like, I mean, obviously travel was the very first thing that was impacted, which totally makes sense. And then what we saw afterwards is that so we have, for example, one client that does like private tutoring. So like they do English lessons on a one-on-one basis, or help for kids that struggle in school. So they kind of got affected at the point where obviously like the local restrictions kind of kicked in. So that was I would say like 1.5 weeks later in comparison to like the travel situation. And for them it was quite interesting because they were like a very, I would say, offline business up to
Mhm.
up to that point, right? So they were like doing, it's all in person trainings and meetings. So they kind of pivoted in within a week to become like an online play, right? So like
Mhm.
now it's all running through the different web kind of possibilities, like Zoom or Hangouts or whatever. And I think they were quite proud for a reason, because like they made a very quick transformation. I mean, you could probably also argue that they should have done it earlier, but I think at the end of the day, it's really cool. And for us as an agency, it's quite an interesting challenge because you need to move relatively fast and relatively quick. On the other hand of the spectrum, I would say, of course, there are also clients or verticals even that win, right? Where stock trading, I think is a good example where there's so much demand right now because obviously everyone wants to kind of jump on this bandwagon of making a quick buck, or just be smart about it and potentially kind of go in right now when things are low. Either way, so like the demand is there for like a lot of like new lead gen or like new registrations around like stock trading platforms. So we saw an uptick there. Yeah, but generally I would say I feel that, I mean, certainly because travel is pretty big and is a big sector in itself, that we lost more, if that makes sense, than we gained, if you want to put it that from a client perspective, I would say. Yeah.
Have you seen some sort of a general cutback in budgets or sort of budget cutbacks in some sectors? And I don't mean necessarily those directly affected. I don't mean travel, but other areas. I don't know, finance or
yeah, I think so. I mean, what for us, we usually work in like two different models, I would say. So I can only say how it kind of ended up on my desk, or how it feels for us, right? But like we usually work in either in a retainer model, so that could be just the kind of the regular like hourly setup or whatever. So for those, and that especially was true in paid, relatively quickly you had campaign pauses coming in, right? So that doesn't necessarily mean they were like entirely kind of cancelled or whatever. But just like, okay, we need to pause, and then of course, I mean, what can you do, right? If there's nothing to advertise for, then that's the only thing there is. So generally, I would say we've been dealing with quite a bit of like budget pausing situations where they then, of course, when it kind of kicks back up, then they wanna, of course, continue and will continue, right? Because if you take a travel example, that people will travel again when they are allowed to. So that's the one thing. The second thing that we noticed is that the other model that we usually have is that there's project-based business, right? And that's probably mainly true for SEO, but also for some of the other channels, maybe just in a kind of lower amounts. But like generally, the project business, we usually have like I should probably say, we usually had a lead time of 8, maximum 10 weeks. So like mid of March, we would close business for mid of May, end of May, either way. And that slowed down, right? So at least for us. So what we're seeing there is that it kind of like people stick to the essential or the things they really need to do, but the bigger budget situations for like, let's do this project, let's do that project, in general, that kind of is less right now. And I'm quite curious how that's going to develop, because I mean, also, I mean, I guess that's probably true for a lot of agencies, but if you're depending somewhat on project business, you certainly have staff that's just there to tackle projects, right? So if like if the project flow slows down, then obviously all of a sudden you end up in a situation where you'll probably be overstaffed, because at the end of the day, normally you would have this kind of churn of projects coming and going, which now potentially there's going to be, I don't know, maybe there's just like a 2-3 months period where there's less work. So that's something we're looking at right now, because it's a bit too early to say, but like we normally would have seen, I guess, more business in the last 2 weeks coming in for May, and that hasn't happened yet. And frankly, I don't think that's going to recover that quickly. So yeah, we have to see, I guess, about that.
Have you had to make any cost adjustments or staff adjustments or any kind of adjustments in sort of the cost structure of the agency to address this?
Yeah, I mean, we are relatively big right now with like 100, close to 140 people. I mean, that machine needs a certain amount of turnover, obviously, to kind of make it work. So, I mean, I would be lying if we wouldn't be affected, right? So, I mean, we revisited like all the costs and cut off like non-essential stuff. Obviously, I mean, we're saving quite a bit of money due to the fact that the office is actually closed. So, like, normally we have a kitchen, we have our own chef. So all of those things are obviously taken out as well. And then so the German government, similar to most European countries, has a program in place twofold it. So the one is around like if you would need to reduce working hours for staff, then so like simple example, you have someone who works full time, 160 hours, right? So we say you would only have work for that person for like half time, so 80 hours. for the 80 hours they lose, the government will then compensate 60 or 67%, depending on the social status of their salary. So they're losing net salary, but at least there's a proper coverage in place, and there's certain models where you can kind of work with that. I guess the German situation, but we're usually pretty kind of used to that, is there's a lot of paperwork around that. I think in other countries it's a bit easier to implement, but overall there's a program in place, and we're using the program so that we don't, because the last thing that we want is we don't want to have people to leave or lay them off in the worst case, because at the end of the day business will come back and it will kick back up, and then like you need those again. So right now I guess it's like this, I almost call it like team exercise to pull through, right? So we're shifting a lot of stuff internally. We're trying to see, because we were in a comfortable spot that we were relatively heavily booked, especially for April and also getting into May. So we shifted a lot of things and tried to kind of adjust the internal like resource usage, if that makes any sense. So yeah, it's a bit of both, but yeah, again, I think for us it's really like we're really like cautious and trying to see what's happening in the next weeks, because that's probably more affecting the long run now. Overall, I think we were really lucky so far. We didn't have had like full cancellations, only like, yeah, as I said, pauses or shifts that, let's say, like take some budget from now but move it into something like a Q4 situation. So that's quite okay. It's just like it comes down to really strong planning and controlling, I would say. Yeah.
What do you recommend when clients approach you with that kind of request, either to to pause projects or to postpone projects? What's your general advice in the current situation?
Well, I think we had. I mean, obviously, we had this discussion internally as well, right? Like with our team leads, we were like sitting and discussing and trying to see what the general approach should be. And I think one thing that we realized relatively quickly is that there is not a single like answer that's valid for everyone, because they are all in a unique situation. I think what helps is, as if you can afford as an agency, like I think the first thing that you should always try to figure out is that just a cash flow situation problem for the client, or is it something more severe because they potentially like they're so low on revenue themselves that they can't like reinvest it into marketing. So I guess that's the first thing. But generally, if you can afford it, I guess like longer payment terms could be a solution to it. That's what we move to for some clients, and I mean for others, I think it's understanding how their business is impacted. Right? I think there's two types right now. The one is or maybe three. The fairly obvious is everything around travel industry and whatnot, because they just can't do it. So like, there's no sense in forcing them, even though I'm not sure if you even can, but like, so we go that way. So well, we are in the same boat here. So we accept the cutbacks and try to either shift or move or whatever we do, or if they can still afford it. And there's some that are really smart about it, I have to say. We're trying to shift into something like landing page conversion rate optimization situations, where we're trying to use the time now because you get less volume right now, because people are either they're not searching or they're searching differently, or paid search ads just have a lower CTR in comparison to what it was before. So we're trying to kind of get the most out of the traffic. And for some others, it's the situation that they need the resources somewhere else. So where we're like saying, okay, then let's use the time or the hours that we can just support you with, like, I don't know, community management, crisis management, webinars, videos, those types of situations, because you need this content for the situation right now to deal with generally with inquiries or with whatever is out there. So I guess, yeah, that's the second situation, like shifts and moves, I would say. And then the third for us, I mean, sadly or unfortunately, I would say there are some that panic for no reason, really. Where like, yeah, it's crisis and we need to cut things, but the question is that really valid? And I guess at the end of the day, again, it goes back to having a proper discussion and trying to understand the reasoning behind it. But overall, I think if you're in a partnership, then I think it's at least about understanding why and what the reasons are, and trying to kind of find a mutual beneficial agreement of that sort, right?
Do you with I've sort of seen this dichotomy between, as marketers, should we sort of talk a lot about COVID-19 now? Should our communication incorporate the current crisis heavily, or should we try to go back to sort of business as usual as soon as possible, and sort of focus on the product. And again, this is not applicable, let's say, to travel, because that's in a situation. But where do you stand on that debate?
Well, I think it would be pretty naive to just like entirely switch back to business as usual. I guess that's not the way, for me at least, it's not the way to do it. I would rather be very transparent about it. So like be transparent about it in the situation towards our clients. So like we communicate very openly also even on our website. So while we moved everyone to home office, we are still there for you. Those are the channels. How can we help? Can we like get into your internal comms to have a more direct communication and whatnot? So I think that's the one thing, right? The second thing is obviously how to deal with it internally. I mean, we used to run now like weekly mini all staff meetings where everyone dials into a Zoom call for like 45 minutes where we just give an update, which normally we wouldn't have done it that frequency. But I guess since everyone's now working from home, that's something that you need to do just to kind of have the transparency around what's happening, because what impacts the company at the end of the day impacts our team as well, right? So I think there's also like, we try, obviously from an operational side, you probably need to do business as usual wherever possible. But like, I guess that's like the more organizational part. The second part or second answer to your question would be, if you look at it from a campaigning mode or like a working mode with clients or for clients, Germany is quite heavy still on everything around the like COVID outbreak situation out there. So it's really hard to kind of land proper coverage right now for everything that's off topic. So we went at least in a way that we started to adjust some of the campaigns to have an angle to it. I'm not saying like, let's go all crazy on COVID content now. I guess that's not the right way to do it. But yeah, I think some adoption sometimes is necessary. Also because some topics feel completely off, which you have probably had a good idea or a good concept for that kind of is 6 months old, and now in the current situation you just can't run with it, right? So I think there are some sensitive topics there as well in terms of communication and campaigning. So yeah, for those I would say the adjustment or an adjustment in general is probably the right spin to do it. And lastly, I guess that's more for like the leadership level type of person. If you're a CEO, if you're C-level of that sense, or run an agency, or even if you're like a freelance solo player, I guess. So what we ended up doing is we built like a mini portal. We can probably put it in the notes. Coronafight.net. What we try to do, because I think there's a lot of content out there. Not everything is great, but like there's some essential reads on business impact, studies, those types of things where you really think like this is what I need. Also, if I need to recalculate business cases or look into dips that my clients have. So how does it correlate with what others are seeing? So we try to collect or curate a bunch of must reads that we update, because I think it necessarily will be right now part of our daily life, but I don't want to waste hours and hours and hours with it, because at the end of the day I have a job to do as well, right? So I guess it's a bit of both.
Yeah, I've also seen you've launched I think called a multi-stream, a live stream across platforms. It's a discussion between you and a member of your staff, or that was just
that's exactly the point. So the reason why we started doing it is because there was SMX Munich a couple of weeks ago, and they were forced to move into like a virtual edition as well, right? So they couldn't run the conference, obviously. And what happened for them is that I ended up doing like a long Q&A session after my talk, and I just feel because we as marketers now are somewhat isolated in this situation a bit, right? And it's the same why you guys are doing the stream, right? Is that there still needs to be an exchange and a bit of knowledge sharing and just talking to people. I think especially in our industry, it's super important. We are very, very much used to it, and that's the thing. Like from our perspective, there's a format is lacking where. Yeah, so I have Dominique on the stream. She's my head of content. So we just talk about general stuff around the situation, but not necessarily only Corona. So we talk about things like challenges with home office. Is going to be one episode that we will be airing this week with special guests. We had last time we talked about crisis communication. So there was like this. I'm not sure if you've seen it. This crazy example of how Adidas wanted to. Not pay rent, and that went entirely crazy, and especially not so much about the messaging per se, but like how they dealt with it socially was really weak, right? So we're trying to pick up on those things and just kind of be sensitive about those things and just kind of help people out. So we're going to be transforming this into a bit like an AMA kind of format, just where, yeah, I guess we can provide and hope to provide guidance on where it's needed on topics that currently are somewhat relevant. Yeah.
One last question about this. How big of a part of your communication are these, let's say, COVID-19 related activities going to be for the agency? Is that going to be the focus, or are you sort of retaining other activities for now? What's your take on that?
Well, I think right now it's relatively hard to answer, to be very honest. Like I thought we just see what happens because I felt that there's this need out there, and for now there's good feedback for that. So I think for now we just continue with it. I guess one of the reasons why we do it is because we have, differently to some other agencies, we have a pretty broad profile, so we can like try or touch on different topics and move things between channels, and trying to kind of help really not only by like, well, let's reduce the budget or let's move a budget, but rather like really help with what makes sense for a client in that situation. And I feel a bit of, you know, content coverage around that probably makes sense. Yeah, so I guess for now we just wait and see, and figure out if that's something that people actually like and that resonates, and if so, I guess we just continue for as long as it makes sense. I think for us it was also a good opportunity to experiment a bit more with video. So that seems to work quite well, even though it's time consuming, but I guess it's worth it, especially the situation where you're actually kind of forced to somewhat move to a medium like this, rather than just, you know, I go to the pub and meet someone in the evening for a beer and chat over SEO, right?
Yeah, I encourage everyone to actually check all of these things out. The things I've looked at were in English, so they were.
Yeah, it's all English. True. Yeah.
So easy for us to digest. Bastian, thank you so much for taking time to share with us.
Absolutely.
Best of luck to you. Best of luck to PKs as well. And I hope to be able to see you in Bratislava at the next sales desk if we're all lucky.
I'm looking very much forward to it. Thanks for having me. Have a good morning.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye.